The Jim and Terry Show coming to you from the Hobbit Hole Studio. I'm one of your hosts, Terry.
And I'm the other host, Jim.
He's the host with the most. He's got the most ideas of all kinds of things. And this podcast is going to be reflecting two old guys in a Hobbit Hole Studio in front of a microphone. They love talking about themselves and their lives. So we're going to talk about ourselves and our lives. And Jim suggested this one.
Yes, things that our children and grandchildren can't imagine we didn't have.
A world without?
A world
these.
without.
Okay.
I want you to imagine the hottest day of the year. Feels like it's 42 degrees out. The sun has been out
Was that
all
42 C or F?
day. Celsius.
That's another thing.
Well, they didn't have Celsius. We didn't have Celsius.
We didn't have Celsius.
So it's 105 degrees.
Fahrenheit.
It's been that way for 3 days. And the night's falling. And you're laying on your bed,
Sweating.
in your underwear, trying to fall asleep. You're in agony. You're tossing and turning. It's so bloody hot because we didn't have air conditioning. Nobody did.
AC.
And then you had to get a ride to school. No, we didn't get rides to school. We walked. Okay, but
Uphill both ways.
you needed to go somewhere. And you get in a car in that 100-degree temperature, and there is no air conditioning.
Yes.
Matter of fact, your old man's sweating to death because there is no power steering. And if you want the window down, well, that's another hot one. You had to wind it down. There was no power windows. But there was
right.
another thing that you didn't have to burden yourself with either. There wasn't safety belts.
Right. No seatbelts. How about that? Did you ever drive a car or have to learn on a car where the stick shift was
Yep.
on the column?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Look, watch. In, up, down. Hey?
That's not bad.
I
Not
remember
bad.
it. I remember
you
that.
remember
yeah.
the positions on the column
On the
shift.
column shift, yeah.
Unbelievable.
And you just, that's just the way it was, right? But that no air conditioning was everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was just the beginning of the automatic doors, which were always broken, it seemed. But remember the beginning? You stepped on a mat, and it opened the door for you going into a grocery store.
Oh, yes. You're
Yeah.
into a grocery store because you're talking about. Let's stick on cars for a while
All right.
because there's so much to explore about things we didn't have in cars.
We didn't have
So-
FM radio.
No.
You just AM radio.
AM radio back in the days.
And I'm not sure, I doubt it, no cassette, no nothing.
No.
No, because it wasn't invented yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
Were cigarette lighters in your car?
Yes,
growing up?
cigarette lighters were always in a car and an ashtray.
Because they were, that was a culture that smoked. Everybody smoked.
Everybody smoked everywhere. When you were waiting to see your doctor, you were smoking.
The doctor was probably smoking.
And the doctor was probably smoking. You could smoke on planes, in airports. You could smoke. I can't imagine what it must have been like. And I lived in it.
Yes.
Yeah. Where
We
you
have
just
people-
covered in smoke.
We have people with a phenomenon called nose blind, where they can't smell that the smoke is on them.
Yeah, yeah.
My ex-father-in-law, God rest his soul, smoked like a trooper. And the clothes, it was in their furniture. When you went to visit, it was everywhere. The smoke.
Yeah.
You couldn't get rid of the smoke.
My house, I don't know if it's still there, but my wife's office.
Yes, I can remember my first impression of seeing your home
And
and,
the
walking to the
and the
front door and
stain.
looking up. I think it was up to the left.
Yeah, yeah.
And that yellow patch. That
Yeah,
went
yellow
up-
patch was
went
nicotine.
Up the aluminum siding and through
Yeah.
the soffit and up with the eavesdrop.
Yeah.
And it was discoloration
Yeah, it was from nicotine.
from nicotine.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still there. I wonder. I
hope
doubt
it's
it.
been-
I doubt
I
it.
hope it's been power
Because
washed
it was
since then.
very, very.
It was very pronounced.
Yeah,
and
you
that
could
was
see
my
it at the
first
time.
impression of coming up to your house.
Yeah.
What is this?
I
and then you
know.
explain that.
And every now and then, not as much as you used to. Somebody might get in an elevator, and you could tell they smoke. Imagine
yeah.
all of us were like that, Terry.
Yes.
Whether you smoked or not, you
all
stunk
smelled
of
it.
smoke.
Yep.
So there was that.
Okay, let's move on from cars then to other things, like things about cars in the 1960s and 70s. I remember my music teacher had a car where the shifter was a button on the
push
dash.
button, yes.
Push button on the dash.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable advancements.
Yes.
And you notice they didn't last very long.
I
don't know if you'd find a car now or a truck anywhere that
with a
would have
push
that.
button. So they must have had a functional.
Yeah.
It was,
Well, my dad brought a car home. He never did buy it. I think my mom exerted her power on this one. He brought a big Buick home,
oh, yeah.
and it had electric windows, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I mean, electric windows, the only one I'd ever seen. And I don't think he bought it. He probably told them he was going to buy it and just brought it, took it for a joyride, knowing my dad brought it home to show us. Amazing car. But, you know.
Now, you said a Buick, so was
I think it was a
Buick Riviera or a Buick Wildcat?
I don't know. I just remember it was Buick.
Yeah.
And I don't know if, it had power windows.
Yeah, I can remember the first power windows.
Yeah.
It wasn't in our car, but we had my uncle, who seemed to be wealthier than the rest of us, had power windows and, of course, AC when it came out. How about aerials? Do you remember
Every
aerials?
car had an aerial.
And it got broken off often
all the time
in a car wash or by thugs.
But then they had then the real expensive cars started having electric aerials.
Yes,
where you pushed the button, it brought the aerial down, you
Yes.
took the aerial up.
Yep.
And that was for naught because so many people that had electric aerials forgot to use it and broke their aerial off. So it was, again, now it's this, you don't need aerials, you just got that little hump somewhere.
to date ourselves in this life without these things, do you remember CBs? Citizen band radios.
Oh, yeah.
Breaker 501 got you back to 2-4 good buddy.
Oh, yeah.
From
I had
Smokey and the Bandit. And
well, we used to have
Burt Reynolds
CB radios going down to Florida. We had bought portable ones.
Yes.
And you put the aerial on the roof, and you used it to go down to Florida and talk to each other. You don't see hardly any of them now because, remember, that was the time when we didn't have telephones.
No.
And
So how do you communicate?
So you didn't. You left. Like, imagine our teenage listeners and all 415,000, is there? Anyways, you can imagine leaving a house and no communication whatsoever. Now, if you had a dime, you could find a pay telephone somewhere. Sometimes they were out of order, but you could usually.
Have they disappeared? When's the last time you ever saw
I
a payphone?
haven't seen one in a long time. Because everybody's got even the poorest of people seem to have the ability to have a phone. Somehow they can't manage to feed their children in the morning, but they all got a phone.
Now, what else do your grandkids can't imagine you living in a world without these things?
Well, a color TV, of course. It was black and white TV, and for a large portion of our life, it was 2 or 3 channels. That was it. Yep. And a lot of the time, one person had to stand by the TV and hold.
Got better reception with your.
You got your body touched it, and you held
coat
a
hanger,
aerial
piece of wire.
Some kind of a piece of wire in your hand. And if you had aluminum windows, which was a fad for a while, you could touch the wires over to the aluminum window, hoping to pick it up. And but it was TV, man. Yeah. You got to see. There was one channel always came in, but the other ones, it was blurred and horrible.
Yep. And
remember, another thing that you never had 24/7 TV.
No,
it went off.
They all signed off.
They signed off, and they signed back on in the mornings.
Yes.
And I remember Saturday mornings, I'd be sitting there with the Indian or whatever the color, even though there was no color, but it had the pattern, the television signal pattern, and you'd sit there, and it would be just
staring at the station. Yeah. Until it came on there.
And then it would stop, and then you knew. Da, 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 da,
yes, it started off with the national anthem.
Yeah, and that would be, and then signing off was a similar thing.
Yes.
So there, you after the 11 o'clock news, you had nothing. Yeah. And 11 o'clock news was like a half an hour tops. And then TV was gone for the night. So
this 24/7 world that our kids and grandkids are brought into was not a 24/7 world. In fact, what do they call it? A 7-Eleven?
Yeah.
Open all night? When was the first time you ever saw anything open all night?
Yeah. Actually, it was 7 in the morning till 11, wasn't it?
Well, that was how it started.
And then and that was like unbelievable. And the poor slaves that had to work those shifts.
Yes.
And then supermarkets came in, and the supermarket was a fad. Now you would call it your local grocery store. But then they were called supermarkets, and then we talked about the first automatic doors. But if it snowed and it wasn't kept
How
clean,
many times did a manager come out and tell you to get off the mat?
oh yeah, kids would play on it. Yeah,
Step on, step
Yeah.
off, step on.
and
step
now
on.
you can't imagine all the other doors you had to open.
Yes.
And that's why we learned to hold the door for somebody else.
Yes.
That became part of just normal life.
Etiquette and culture.
Yeah, just normal life. You held the door for somebody else. But now everything's automatic and everybody's looking down at their phones.
Yeah.
Nobody's holding nothing for anybody most of the time. So, but all other doors you had to open yourself. Probably even hospital doors, So you'd hold them, for the ambulance to come in, the patients. So that was something that just really was something that the kids today can't even imagine, in our black and white world.
I can remember the sound of the dentist drill. And although there may be a similar sound, it's not the same
No.
drill at all.
No.
So be thankful for that, because it was a form of torture.
Police cars were noticeable. There was
Yes.
there was no.
Oh, the black and whites.
Yeah, the black and white police cars, all noticeable. The yellow, was it yellow police cars or was that cabs?
Yellow cabs for sure.
Yeah. So there was all that, and a thing that our kids probably can't get their heads around. Do you remember the air raid sirens?
Yes.
And the testing of the air raid sirens,
Yep.
and the drills on what to do if a company fired a nuclear missile at your country. Weird.
Yeah, and the only ones who had nuclear weapons were the U.S. and Russia at the beginning. Britain and France came afterwards. But yeah, so it was likely a Russian strike that we were hiding under that desk, the student desk.
Yeah. No microwaves, folks. No
No,
microwaves.
no microwave
Yeah.
ovens. What?
And remember the first video cameras were the size of your floor computer.
That's right.
They were huge.
You had to put it on your shoulder.
And you put an 8-track cassette clip in order to record on
8-track.
that. Yeah,
put
the
in
big one,
the big video.
Yeah, whatever
Yeah,
that
VHS.
was. VHS, great big VHS.
Yeah,
click in.
cassette.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember those days. And the transition now to you do video on your phone. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean cameras, and very few people had them.
Yes.
If you had a camera, you wouldn't be dragging it around all day.
Nope.
Now you got phones that take pictures. It's amazing.
It is amazing. And speaking of the size of things, do you remember the first microwave oven?
I remember they cost about $1,200.
And the size of
And
those
they
things?
were, 3 feet
They
wide?
were like the size of your
Yeah.
your TV and your old wood
yeah.
console.
They were huge.
The days of yore.
Yeah, and many, many more things we just didn't prep for it. This was
that
off the cuff.
Off the cuff. Things that we lived through that your kids have no idea.
No idea.
Bye-bye for now.